My guest in this special episode today of Talk About Your Community is Jillian from Calendly, and we are going to be talking about her perspective and journey across the community profession since her time at Autodesk up until today when she is with Calendly and the many organizations that she's helped in between. She has some unique and extremely valuable perspectives on community building, community architecture, and the ways in which we are tracking the value of community, what kind of metrics we're using. Stay with us. We will be right back. Kalisa, let's roll the opening. Hello and welcome to Talk About Your Community. This is a show that is designed for anyone who is interested in being a better community builder. And I have a variety of guests on who have perspectives about the space from both the community profession and outside of it. Today, I am with a friend and colleague from the community space, Jillian, who is currently with Calendly, but you've had a career with a number of enterprise community spaces as well as the community roundtable. And I'm excited to welcome you on this show. And let's get really nerdy about community as a topic. Thank you for being here.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you.
So Jillian, maybe to kind of get started, can you tell us a little bit about your community origin story moment? Like when did you realize, what was the moment that you were, bitten by the radioactive spider of community and got spider powers?
So it's funny. I always tell people that, oh, it was an accident. And, I kind of I unintentionally forced my way into community. But it's funny. I think as I've gotten a little bit older, a little more experience, I think I've realized it wasn't an accident. I grew up loving science and data and research. Like I was the kid who would sit down with an encyclopedia and write a report just for fun. Like, don't judge me too hard, but I was that.
No judgment here. That's amazing.
But I think kind of like the moment that I was like, oh, I like this is the first time, I was working in community, this big Autodesk community, and I pulled a giant CSV file of community members. And when you start seeing that moment of connection and you start seeing patterns and recognizing, behaviors, you're just like, oh, I love this. So I think that might be the moment where that radioactive community spider might have gotten me. And I think that's the thing that actually keeps me in it. Because literally right before I jumped on with you, I was neck deep in data from a whole bunch of different self-serve channels, trying to piece together this very specific pattern recognition. And I'm like, oh, I still love this. Almost 20 years into my career, you can still hand me a community CSV file, and I'm an incredibly happy nerd. So
that's the deep magic. I love that. Really amazing. So I guess I can definitely relate to that. You understand, you have this moment where you realize you like digging through the data, you like spreadsheets, but you're also there for the human element of it as well, enabling people with your product, your service, or whatever the cause of that community happens to be, and that's really exciting to see. So tell me a little bit about your career progression. You mentioned Autodesk, and I mentioned a couple of other things like the community roundtable. What's your journey been? And sort of, I'm really interested in getting into your perspective, because you've been in the community space a bit longer than I have even. And while it sounded like I was making you sound old, you're definitely not. But I'm curious about your view of sort of where we've been, particularly over the past couple of years since the pandemic as well. But maybe take me from the beginning a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So my educational background was actually in architectural engineering and structural engineering. So that was kind of where I thought I was going to go. And when I was in college, I got pretty much picked up by Autodesk, not for community. I was very much, well, I was a very active community member. I was a super user, for lack of a better way of putting it, in one of their specific areas. Got picked up, landed at Autodesk, and that was ended up being the first community I worked on. That was where I got bit by the spider. Um, and from there, I pretty much kind of my career has been a little bit of like all over the place. I spent quite a few years working at the community roundtable in an advisory capacity, which was really cool because I got sent around the world to go work on quite literally every type of community you could possibly think of. There's not really, I think, any type of community, community practice, innovation, knowledge, support that I haven't worked on. I got to work in every type of industry. I mean, I was working in the financial space, I was working in the gaming space, um, safety services, security, healthcare. And then after a while, I kind of wanted to, in some ways, settle down and actually own a community again. And ended up leaving that space and going to work in the defense industry, which is really funny. People look at me sometimes and they're like, hold on, what? The defense industry has communities? And it's like, yes, but they're very strange. You sometimes actually have to hold a security clearance to work on a community. Very strange, but it was cool and I loved it. And then I decided to take a leap, actually during the pandemic, and go into the SaaS and startup space. It looked interesting. It was something that, I really hadn't touched since I was at the community roundtable. And I moved into Zapier, where I led their community program and also oversaw their user education and user documentation space for a while. And then, like most people who I think have architectural backgrounds, at some point you're like, I want to go build a new building. I don't want to keep renovating the same one. Like, this one looks great. And so I decided to move over to Calendly, where once again, I got to build a community absolutely from scratch. And we're about a year and 9 months into that journey so far. So I've been a little bit of everywhere. I've seen a little bit of everything. I've worked with pretty much every major platform. And I still love it, which is cool.
I love that. So, I mean, I'm obviously biased towards people that have sort of worked in that consulting space, for a bit, because I mean, it really is the way for you to gain perspective,
Yeah.
on the commonalities of communities, but also the differences, in the spaces. Like, I've truly appreciated the variety, the dozens of community organizations that I've had the chance to look at and offer insight about, or they're looking for a turnaround, or they're looking to re-platform, or whatever it is. Those are great projects. I do have to admit, sometimes I get a little wistful about not, necessarily being the head of one of those communities, but I kind of am now with my role with one of my customers, that I've really been kind of leading up their program for the past couple of years. So but you're right. Like, I think you missed the accountability
Mm.
of having to build or sustain or grow a space, and that's pretty exciting. A really interesting remark about the having to have a top secret clearance to do defense industry communities. Of course, those individuals need to have conversations, and of course those communities are perhaps a little less formalized than the regular communications channels. So yeah, you need to make sure those are secure spaces and that they are hardened against espionage, I'm sure, and all kinds of bad actors, in the space. That had to have been kind of amazing. So you had to go through a clearance process
I
to,
did. I
yeah.
did. Yeah. Yeah. It was a really interesting thing. And it was especially interesting because I've never, other than that specific community, I've never had a community where I had to come up with a security breach crisis plan.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like to literally, to get to the point where like part of that breach plan was like knowing how to actually log into a server and shut a server down, and like to physically isolate where the physical I was like, what the? It was
Wow.
really cool though, and I mean, the work that came out of that community was just I think to this day, like people ask me all the time, they're like, of all the communities you've worked on, what was your favorite? And I'm like, I think it might have been that one. Like the work I did there was just, and it was also cool because it was like so, sometimes it was really tangible too. Like you'd actually get to see the impact of that transfer of knowledge and be like, whoa, like we just helped prevent like a major defect or a major, cost issue or something like that. And
That's
also like know where that product was going and to actually know the impact it was having on troops or safety or something like that. It was like,
yeah. You're
wow.
you're demonstrably saving lives. Talk about an ROI of community. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Like I don't know if I'll ever get to do something like that again. That was just holy cow. Holy cow.
super cool. And you literally have a license to community. So
Yeah, exactly. I can neither confirm nor deny, right?
right, that's right. One that's really that's a wonderful story. So kind of I do want to spend some time getting into the work you're doing with Calendly right now because I'm very excited about Calendly. I'm a big fan. Obviously, full disclosure, I'm one of the ambassadors, for
Yeah.
the brand because I'm a, I don't know if I'm a super user. I guess kind of maybe, but
I think we would definitely like give you a super user title. Like absolutely. Like
I
I can't think of anyone else actually that I'd say like, like
I'm
top
definitely a fan.
level.
I'm definitely a fan, and I use a lot of the integrations. I want to get some more zaps going with it. Like
Ooh,
I haven't done anything. I've just been getting into Zapier a little bit more. So
yeah.
um, I probably need to like schedule a little time with you and get some
Yes.
ideas. um, but before we get into the world of Calendly and all of its wonders, I am really curious. For someone that's been active in the space since about 2010, 11-ish, it looked
Yep.
like from your background. Um, where have we been and where are we going? This is sort of a big question on everyone's mind. We kind of did the round of 2025 predictions and
Mhm.
trends and all that stuff. I'm not so interested in necessarily prognostication, but when you've been in a particular professional space, as long as you and I have been, you start to develop some opinions about like the software and about
Yep.
how leadership thinks about communities and what's kind of gone in and out of fashion in this space. I'd really love your perspective or your thoughts about this world that we work professionally in.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the big trends that I'm seeing is so back when I had initially started in my career and then like, the years as the community roundtable, there was this really big focus on that community had to do everything. Like once you were into the community space, like that community served in every specific way and your goal was to keep people in that community and engagement metrics and reduce the lurkers and all of that stuff. And that was an interesting time because at that point there really wasn't so much other noise going on, and a lot of times it was kind of like no one knew what to do with community, so usually they just kind of put us in a corner, leave us alone, and let us self-manage. But what I'm really seeing now, and I think I love it actually, is we're finally moving out of the shadows, and now we're at the point where community is so here at like Howling, for instance, we actually position community as a welcome center or like a visitor center. So when you come into community, we're not trying to keep you there. That's actually not our goal. We want you to go back into product. We want you to go into help center. We want you to attend a webinar. We want you to go engage in a beta, whatever it is. Like
Mhm.
we want you to bounce, which is really interesting because that's a very different metric than we've been dealing with for, let's say, honestly, the past 20 years. Um, and the other part of that now is that we're also now working with so many other teams. I mean, just this week alone, I have worked with customer marketing, I've worked with product marketing. Um, I've worked with, gosh, who have I worked with? I've worked with the product team. I've talked to the engineering team. We had to do some work with like our events and internal communication because we had a customer that was going to be doing a video and an all hands. Um, we're no longer in the shadows. Like we are so cross functional and connected. Um, And I think that's really cool. The issue with that is people still don't know where to put community. And even today, even in like my current career, sometimes I'm kind of like, all right, where should I sit? Like, I still actually don't know the answer to this question. I mean, right now I sit in our CX organization. Our CX organization goes up into our GTM organization. Sometimes I'm like, should I be up at the GTM level? Am I good over here in CX? Should I be in marketing? Do I sit in product? Like it's a weird thing because you're influenced by the function that you sit in, which is very much, I hate to say it, a relic of the past. Whereas community now is kind of part of that bigger, super cross-functional thing. And I think we need to start figuring out how to make that spider web work.
Yeah, you're reminding me of what one of my past guests on the show is Sahana Chattopadhyay, and she's I kind of think of her as a philosopher of community. She's amazing, but she talks a lot about the need to lean more into organicism
Yeah.
with organizations, and just let organizations develop. Don't create these artificial hierarchies,
Yeah.
in the spaces. And it got me thinking as you were describing sort of like where does community live, and of course we know it's often these days living in marketing or under customer success, but not always.
Right.
A lot of times it's on its own. Maybe we are like part of that natural connective tissue between all of these different parts of the organization. If we were a plant, if we were a flower, we might be part of the stem that's connecting the other piece,
Mhm.
all the leaves and all the different and the petals and everything. Like, do we need to be in one of those places? And maybe the question becomes is there an ecosystem advantage for the community to live in any one department of an organization? You inspired me to extend that metaphor, perhaps unwisely, but
No, no, I agree, and it's an interesting situation, and there is like an advantage to each one of those functions. Like for instance, sitting in CX right now, I am super aware of the voice of the customer from so many different channels. Like that's actually the project I was working on this morning, was pulling in 4 different customer channels and analyzing them to find significant trends and themes to inform a much bigger project that's happening. I can do that because I'm in CX. Like I can see more of that data. Whereas if I was marketing, I might be more focused on awareness and acquisition. If I was in product, I might be more focused on betas and upcoming functionality and feedback. And it's an interesting situation to be in. I'm curious to see where it goes. Like that's probably the ones I'm like tracking the most. Um, I think the other area that I think has been interesting to watch is the platform space.
Mhm.
Um, it's I
Wow.
always think it's funny too because like you kind of talk to
Yeah.
people sometimes and you're like, do you remember when Jive went under? And like that's kind of like one of those you can tell for like the OGs versus like the new kids on the block. You're like, were you there? Were you at Jive World when it happened? Because I was. Um,
Yep.
so
Th-
um,
Those were
that's
the first communities I worked on were Jive. Yeah.
yeah, no, and that's funny. I think a lot of us were like, oh, I remember Jive. And it's interesting to see the space kind of keep doing this weird like ebb and flow thing. And it's been really, really fascinating. What's more fascinating to me is that I think the platforms that are thriving right now are the ones that have finally realized community teams are small, scrappy, and we wear all the freaking hats. So give us automation, give us what you see is what you get editors,
Yeah.
give us incredible moderation capabilities, keep updating your admin and your analytics experience. And understand that when we show up to a meeting, don't ask us, oh, when is your engineer and your designer and your such and such coming? Because we don't have one. It's us. You're looking at us.
Right. Right.
Um, and I still run into platforms sometimes that kind of act like that. And I'm like, get with the time. You're about 10 years behind things. But
Mhm.
then other platforms, I think, are doing a really nice job of starting to understand that, like, you are looking at the graphic designer, the analyst, the programmer, the mediator, like, so,
Yeah. Right. So, yeah. I mean that you've stuck an arrow through my heart. You've hit that topic so perfectly. Yeah. I mean, most of the communities I worked in over the past at least 5 to 7 years longer
Yeah.
had a solo or one or two person community management shop, and they had to beg, borrow, or steal any more technical resources that they needed if they
Yeah.
weren't able to do something themselves. But a lot of times they just have to go and teach it themselves. As a Gen Xer, I appreciate that thing. Like you just need to go and do it, suck it up, buttercup, and and make it work. But the platforms absolutely need to understand that. There are I think some newer entrants to the community building space that have kind of taken that lesson to heart. They've got the
Yeah.
automations built in. They've got the onboarding processes sort of
Mhm.
built in a little more nicely. The UI UX is flexible. I don't need to know CSS to be able to, or some other freaking language to make changes to the platform. I don't need to push it from staging to production if I don't have to. And not to slag on that. I mean, there are enterprise platforms that I partner with and that I use, and I don't love the processes I have to use to do them. I've had to suck it up and learn that stuff, myself.
Yeah.
But increasingly, we're not going to have to do that. If the platforms are doing their jobs, and as AI tools continue to bleed their way into platform experiences. You know, I was just sharing with you, I want to do more with Zapier. One of the things that I was delighted to find when I got into the platform this time around is they have an AI co-pilot in there, and you
Yeah.
tell it the Zap you want to create, and it
Yeah.
lays it out for you, which saved me about a half an hour of head scratching to figure out where do I start.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. So we won't name the guilty, but
Mhm.
are there some platforms that you kind of like what they're doing right now? Any that you would name that you sort of admire what their approach is?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that I really like, and it's not going to come as a surprise to them, because it was the platform for my last community, and it's the platform for the community I'm currently on. So, Gainsight customer communities. I think they're doing a good job. I mean, I'm they know this. There are some of relics from their past that I'm like, please stop doing this to us. Like, get rid of the flat topics. We need threaded replies.
Right.
Um, but they have some of the most advanced Zapier integration capabilities I've ever seen, which
Nice.
is really amazing because it's allowed my little tiny team of three, which includes me, to do so much more. Like, our moderation right now is fueled effectively by Zapier integrations, and we're able to add in things that frankly are kind of cutting edge. I mean, like, we're at the point right now where we can detect AI generated spam using a Zapier integration. Like, we have a whole thing set up. It's really cool, and it's amazing because it's actually caused AI generated spam to drop off because the AI generated spam wasn't getting detected by the built-in detector. So we have this incredible thing now, and we've kind of, I'm not going to call it a checkmate on the spammers. I know better than to say that, but it is definitely putting a damper on the effectiveness of their strategy. And we're coming out a little bit ahead right now. So
That's amazing.
that's really cool. And the platform is easy to use, and they are really accepting of feedback, and all of that. So it's just, I've really enjoyed working with them. And as far as the guilty, I think they know who they are. Like, I know it's going to sound weird to say that. Like, I think all of us can kind of think of a platform right now that we're like, get with the times, folks. Stuff like that. There's been a few platforms I've been pleased to see that seem to be starting to move like towards the light.
Yep.
Simplifying things. Like, you're talking about pushing code from staging to develop or to production. I just talked to one the other day, and I was like, you've stopped making us do that? Like, and I literally was like, I'm like the amount of trauma I have suffered because of you making me do that for years, and you've stopped. Like, I could hug you.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
very weird call.
It's it I do see, like, particularly in the enterprise community platform space, which is a much narrower space
Yeah.
than the bajillion other, community tools that are out there and growing up. I see motions from I think all of those players to try to update and modernize, but it's hard when you have a legacy code to try
Yeah.
to refactor everything and then try to get all of your customers to go to the new platform. I think it was one of the painful things, Jive went through. Like if back in ye olden times, when when Jive used to be even have an option for an on-premise install,
Yes, they
uh,
did.
and and then they went to their sort of single tenant, multi-tenant, approach. I'm getting really nerdy with this, but like it was a sigh of relief. Like I was working with Seven Summits that did a lot of implementations on Jive at that time, and we had hacked the heck out of SAP's Jive instance to make it do what they wanted it to do. But I mean, it breaks the upgrade path, and so
Yeah.
you need to go to that SaaS based model just so that the customer can't modify what's under the hood, that they paint themselves into a corner, with all of that. So I mean, it's surprising to me that we've had some players hanging around that have taken so long to get away from sort of that heavy customization, world that they were. But for some of them, I think that was maybe their selling proposition, that
I
they
think
had.
so.
Yeah,
Yep.
we'll make it do whatever you want it to do. We're everything to everybody. So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to make sure there's time to talk about Calendly, and so tell me, in taking the lessons you had from Zapier and Autodesk and other places you worked, through the community roundtable. What are you doing today with Calendly? You sort of teased a little bit with like, hey, we don't necessarily care if people bounce out of the community. We're just this wonderful welcoming center. Like, what are the goals, and what's it like to work with the leadership team,
Yeah.
and other groups, within the organization? I'm obviously a fanboy, so I'm just going to sit back here and smile.
Yeah, for sure. No, so it's been a really kind of fun journey. It was funny because I think I literally applied to the job the day it got posted. Um, and had like all my interviews the week that the job got posted. And I remember at one point stopping my manager during the interview process and I was like, whoa, 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 like hold on. Your strategy is not exactly like what I would recommend. And what platforms are you looking at? Because like don't pick these. And it was really funny to like start trying to inform it before I even worked there.
Yeah.
But what's been really amazing about this is, so you know how a lot of times you have a company that someone wants to stand up a community, but like you have to go and convince everyone at the company that's a good idea. That has not been Calendly. Calendly
That's
from day
great.
one was like, we want a community, and like we're all in. And I was that's been weird for me, like to actually have that. Um, and so very quickly built a community here. I think some of the things that I've done differently from the past is, I kind of mentioned about like that bounce thing. I have been diehard against setting membership metrics. I do not set membership metrics. I do not set metrics around registered users. Frankly, I don't even set metrics around engagement. In fact, because of the nature of Calendly community, we are meant to be a community of knowledge. If you can stumble across our community at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to set up something for your business and you happen to find what you're looking for and you look at one singular page for 47 seconds to find what you're looking for, we love it for you. That's a success. And that's really funny because I think a lot of companies are like, but did you convert them into a member? And did they look at 6 pages and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, don't, we don't care about that. Like we're literally here to make sure you got an answer to use the product.
That reminds me so much of I think something Richard Millington's been saying for a long time, which is a lot of these support communities are transactional.
Yeah.
I'm coming in to solve a problem. I solved the problem. I don't need to come back again. I don't need
Yeah.
to do that again. It's just part of the knowledge base
Yeah.
that's there. Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah.
And what's been really cool with this specific community, and we kind of like harnessed this capability very early on, is Calendly is incredibly horizontal. I mean, it's probably one of the most horizontal tools I've worked on. And what I mean by that is, yeah, you can be an enterprise company with 80,000 employees and have a massive Calendly contract for every single person who does sales, demos, and recruiting. You could also be a solopreneur who runs a fly fishing business in the deep woods of Montana, and you do full day guided tours. That's actually one of the people I've talked to. Both of those people
Awesome.
use Calendly. Both of those people use Calendly. But the problem is that not even on the most ambitious of days is my marketing team going to go write how to use Calendly for a fly fishing business. They're not going to go write how to use Calendly for funeral home directors, or how to use Calendly for kitten rescues or farmers, or education, nonprofits. Like, there's a lot of things that we might not touch as specific as our customers need us to.
Mm-hmm.
And but community does, because community has user generated content. So when you come in and introduce yourself and say, hey, I run this fly fishing business, my tours go from X hour to X hour, and I need to set buffers so that I don't accidentally have 2 tours in the same day, that now becomes a piece of content with SEO, and more people are able to find that. And that's probably been the most powerful piece about Calendly community, probably like the most uniquely qualified thing that we're able to do, is that level of solution engineering and niche marketing effectively. And I love it. And what's amazing is that the rest of the company loves it. We try to tell stories all the time. Like, when cool people come into the community and they tell us about these things, we go back and we tell the company, we're like, we just talked to a person who does kitten rescue in like Los Angeles, and she's amazing. And everyone loves to hear it. Or like that one time we had a space observatory in Utah, and they use it for like donations and like public viewings. And we're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And what this is actually transformed into recently is we've started doing this thing where basically we're identifying customers as they come in. And if they seem interesting, whether it be the feedback, the use case, how they describe things, even just how they engage with us, we will try to reach out to them and start developing kind of like a rapport, a relationship, getting to know these people. And maybe start trying to learn more about their use case. Maybe we engage them with, like our social media team, our PR team, our case studies team, and all sorts of stuff like that. And it's been a really cool kind of like, I guess, growth of customer advocacy. Like, we've always had some level of customer advocacy here, but to start seeing this kind of shift into like, what if we identify people off of the cool things that they do, and not just off of how engaged they are in the community? Because that's always been what customer advocacy has been about, is, are you a super user? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like, if that's your one limiting factor, is how much someone posts and how much they talk to you, that's not exactly like the only way to do it. And so we've started moving to this other way, and I love it.
What I love about that, I mean, I see you light up, as you talk about this, but it's an emphasis on relationship, not being tied to platform,
Yep.
and relationship being tied to, establishing rapport and being storytellers, like elevating the stories of your members, of your users, and the
Yep.
things that they do. And I've absolutely experienced this firsthand, testimonial. I've had a conversation or two with Tope, that the CEO, for Calendly, super approachable gentleman, and we've had some lovely discussions about my work as an independent and how I use the platform. And I mean, as you were describing that, I was trying to come up with a metaphor in my brain about like what Calendly is, that horizontalness that you were describing.
Yeah.
And it's almost sort of like a Minecraft, for the business. Like, I can make it into what I need it to be, because like I don't have a big team of other members of Clocktower advisors that I work with, but I have multiple companies that I deal with.
Yep.
And I need all of my calendars to be ingested into one spot so I don't lose my mind. And I need to be able to block off certain times so I can do focused work at
Yeah.
certain times. And now, like, I can even override some of those things or prioritize some of those
Yeah.
time slots. I mean, it's a Swiss Army knife for anybody that does scheduling work, and it's grown so much beyond like what I first used Calendly, I think, when I was still doing recruiting work.
Mm.
So that's way back into the ancient times. And then, like, it was a power move then, even for me to say, like, here, you could pick a time on my calendar to pick. Like, that was an innovation at that point. People would be like,
Yeah.
wow, what is this thing? It's Calendly. Um, I am just over the moon that the platform has continued to develop, and that has such a powerful advocate there like yourself, to be able to build those relationships, and your fresh take, I think, on community not being tied to those tired metrics, that so many organizations glom onto just because they don't know anything else, or they read a lot of um, conventional wisdom about community building. Thank you for bringing perspective and maturity, to the space.
Yeah.
So I think just in a couple of minutes we've got left here, I'd love to hear maybe what you're excited about. Like that, I think you mentioned one thing, like the Zaps, that are built into to Gainsight. But like, what's your take on AI world, or what is there a community platform you've got your eye on that you're excited about these days, or is there a thinker or a writer that you're excited about that doesn't necessarily need to be a community person, but it's an open question. What's inspiring you at the moment?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think I think what's been inspiring me recently is this is gonna sound kind of weird, but like I feel like I finally have enough experience, enough perspective, and maybe a little bit of time on my side to kind of really dive back into some research and kind of like reapproaching community with a very scientific perspective. And I
Mm.
feel like there's finally an appetite for that as well. So that's probably the thing that I'm most excited about. I'm actually doing some speaking at conferences this year, and I'm still kind of sitting here being like, could I go do like a 301 session at any of these where I talk about like a really advanced subject? And I'm excited that I finally feel like we're at that point. There's enough of us that can have those conversations. I'll give a shout out to the community. Like that's one of those areas where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I can go in there and have an incredibly advanced conversation with people who understand it, and that's exciting to me because I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of times across my community career that I've felt kind of isolated. Where you're the only person at your company that does what you do, and it's hard to find people maybe at your level or have the same type of
Yeah.
experiences. And I feel like we're finally seeing that happening. Like there's finally a lot of us where I can say, yeah, like if I have a question, like I can go hit up, the Bryans, the Riches, the Todds, the Nickies. There's a whole lot of really wonderful people coming into the space that are also incredibly skilled. So, people like Max Pete, like he's a delight. I love talking to him.
Max is
Um,
amazing. Yeah. Vinny Logan
yeah,
has done some brilliant stuff in the space. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt
no,
your train of
no,
thought.
no. But there's just so many cool people in the space now. And like that is exciting because I think it also means that we can start influencing things too. We can start putting more pressure on platforms to do better. We can start putting more pressure on the industry to do better. And I think it also means that I know sometimes people get worried about AI, and like I'm not worried about AI because I feel like when I look across all of us, I'm like, our communities are the reason AI has anything to reference. Like we
Mhm.
need to keep being here. I see a lot more of us using AI to kind of give us an extra team member. Like we're using it to help us.
Mhm.
So I'm not worried about it. I don't think I'm going to eat those words in a few years.
I don't think you are either. I'm with you on that. I think that, I mean, we're in the process of cyborgifying ourselves,
Yeah,
that we're negotiating what the relationship is with this new set of tools,
yeah,
at the moment. And I think those are definitely some exciting things that are
Yeah.
happening. Um, well, Jillian, this has been absolutely delightful. Our time has flown by here in the conversation, but wonderful insights. I didn't even get into everything that I wanted to talk about. I was hoping to maybe chat with you a little bit about architecture at some point, because I
Oh,
think there's a wonderful relationship between architecture and the kinds of community build outs that we do.
I have so many thoughts there. So many.
And increasingly, like I think about sort of the design of public space and that relationship with virtual space. And especially as we start looking more at virtual world kinds of
Yeah.
settings, and bring those elements. Like, we have plenty of communities that are text based,
Yep.
most of them, many of them that are text, that are video supported,
Yep.
but none that are video centric that I'm
Yep.
aware of. That maybe Volley app was, but I don't know how active they are right now. And a few that are sort of semi immersive VR worlds,
Yep.
but in the business world, not so much. Like, they're still kind of being dismissed as cartoony or cheesy or not quite businessy. Like, I think people are too worried about, like, am I going to be seen as playing a video game if I have a virtual world community, or there's maybe even still like a hangover from back in the days of Second Life. um, but I'm really dating myself with that reference. But anyways, we're going to have to schedule a follow-up session to talk about that, because I think that'd be a wonderful conversation as well. And I love your perspective, especially having come from training in the world of architectural engineering, because
Yeah.
that's something dear to my heart. I was a drafting student, but I couldn't hack the calculus requirements, so I just but I loved it. I loved the drawings. I love doing 3D drawings and
See, I'm
renderings.
the opposite. I'm really good at the math. I'm a horrible designer. Like, do not like I can modify your building. Do not make me design your building though. I can make sure your building stands up and like can withstand a hurricane or like an earthquake or anything, but like don't make me make it look pretty. I could not do that. That was might be why I ended up in community instead. So
So we'll make that a to be determined conversation to have
okay.
in the future. I would love to ratchet down into that. And as you have any of those 301 conversations in the future, I would love to be a part of those as well. For those of you who have stuck with us through the interview, appreciate you being along for the ride. Please like, comment, share this post. This is up on our YouTube channel, so we'd love it if you could subscribe on Clocktower Advisors YouTube, as well as on LinkedIn. And until then, Jillian, thanks again for being on the show. We'll get you back on here again, and let's keep building great communities.
I think we can. We'll do it.